just do a quick review of what we said yesterday, and then we'll last week and the week before, and then we move on to what we have this week, and we see how it develops. So the first discussion we had is the concept of, can you break a partnership? And the answer is, from the Jewish perspective, at any point, if there's an object or a piece or an asset that is easily divisible, meaning it's clear it could be divisible easily, then any party could impose upon the other party to divide. The Talmud and Maimonides quoting the Talmud refers to this as something that has what they call a din chalukah. It has the law of division. And the simple example is, if I have something that is a field, and we're both partners in the field, and the field has 50 acres, so it's not very complicated to divide a field with 50 acres. You get 25 and I get 25. You have a field and I have a field. And that's relatively straightforward. And therefore, there's no problem. Everybody could impose, each one could impose upon the other one to divide. That's what we discussed the first week. The first week. The second week of this laws of partners, we discuss a case that's more complicated. What is the case? It's something that, for whatever reason, that cannot be divided. It's a house. It's a bathhouse. It's a Beit Habad, which is a place where you press olives. You have one. You can't just split it in half. It doesn't work. You can't say you'll live in half the kitchen and I'll live in half the kitchen. Or maybe you could. We'll see. That's the discussion. So now it's what they call something that does not have din chalukah, something that does not have a law of division. So what do you do then? So again, the assumption is that one party wants to divide, and the other value that we want to do is we want to allow for partners to separate. Why? Not because we don't like partnerships, but we understand that a person would like certain privacy. You can't force somebody to live and participate with somebody that he's not comfortable with. So this goes on to the category of privacy, and the privacy issue will develop as we discuss the, I believe, 14 chapters of the laws of neighbors. A lot of privacy issues come up, as we will, God willing, discuss. But so again, the premise is that we want to allow for the concept of separations. We like that idea. The problem is, how do you divide an asset that is not easily divisible? So the method we came up with last week, the Talmud discusses, again, in the Talmud it's a debate, but we're not discussing Talmud, we're discussing Maimonides. So Maimonides rules according to the opinion that says that you could say this. And what is it? We said it's called gud or igud, which is Aramaic for either buy or sell. And the process is relatively straightforward. And Vicky thinks it's so straightforward she can't figure out why no other system of law adapts this. And I'm with you, Vicky, on this. What you do is one partner comes to the other and says, why would you buy me out for this amount or sell me for this amount? In other words, I name the price, and then you have the right to either buy me out at that price or you have to sell to me at that price. That was the case that we discussed last week, and we discussed why it's, I would say, it's relatively elegant. It's easy to come up with a price, and when it's, even if it's not a perfect solution, we try this method tries to protect the interests of all parties. We want to make sure that the partner who doesn't necessarily want to separate will also be protected, because if the person that wants to break offers a price that is too high, okay, so the other partner will get a lot of money. If he offers a price that's too low, so then the partner who doesn't want to sell will buy him out for a very low price, and he'll make a and he'll earn a profit, a significant profit. So that is what we discussed last week. So if we're ready to move on, we'll move on. If anyone has any questions, it's only the two or three of us. So if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt, because it's not an interruption. That's the truth. Okay, so instead of letting out the law, let's lay out. So we're still in section 2 of Halacha 1, chapter 1, section 2, and we are in really, I think we're up to the third paragraph. So I'm going to jump straight. But now we're at the top of the paragraph that you see on your screen. I hope you see it on your screen. So the scenario we discussed yesterday, I'm sorry, the one important detail of the scenario is the only way I could impose the division is if I am willing to buy or sell. But if I'm only willing to do one, I say, for example, I say, Vicky, we're partners. I want to break the partners. I'm forcing you to buy my property. It doesn't work. I can't say, Vicky, we're partners. I want to separate the partnership. I'm forcing you to sell to me your section. That I can't force that either. I can't force you to buy or sell. What I could do is name a price and then give you the right to buy or sell. So we're going to give a case where a person wants to sell but doesn't want to buy. And that's an interesting case, and Maimonides says you can't do it. So here's the case, and that seems not fair because you see economics, they say the wealthy gets wealthier. The Talmud quotes this. The Talmud says there's a saying that says that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and that's true then and it's true now, and it's going to be true in this case that the wealthy is going to have a certain advantage over the poor in certain cases. But here it goes. So I'm reading the top of the screen. Therefore, the following laws apply if two brothers, one rich and one poor, inherited from their father a bathhouse or an olive press. If the father made these premises for the purpose of hire, the two share the rental equally as long as they desire to remain partners. So the case is that the father builds a bathhouse. Why does he build a bathhouse? To rent out. Now the father dies. The two brothers are partners. So the rent income is still there. So the way they divide it, as long as they want to be partners, they divide the rent. Okay, that's simple. Now we get to a little bit more complicated case. If this bathhouse was never meant for rent, it was meant for the father's personal use. In other words, we're talking about something that is not a rentable. This is something that you use for yourself. The problem here is that, okay, will be the case. If the father made these structures for his personal use, the poor brother cannot force the rich brother to hire them out. Instead, they should use them as their father used them. The rich brother can tell the poor brother, purchase olives and crush them in the olive press. Purchase servants and have them come and wash in the bathhouse. In other words, like this. Let's talk about the olive press. It's an easier case. So if there's an olive press, the father buys an olive press. What do you do with your olive press? Well, you press your olives. The problem here is that the wealthy brother has plenty of olives. So he can get usage of the olive press. The problem is the poor brother doesn't have any olives. So the poor brother wants to sell, wants to rent it. The rich brother says, I'm not renting it. We never rent. This asset was never rented. So the rich brother tells the poor brother, go get olives and use the press. If you don't have olives, it's your fault. You can't compel me to rent it. That is the sad reality for the poor brother. But let's keep going, and you see what the recourse the poor brother has. I'm on the top paragraph of the page. The poor brother cannot compel the rich brother to purchase his portion unless the poor brother tells him, purchase my portion from me or sell me your portion. For I will borrow from others and purchase it, or sell it to the others, and they will purchase it. If he makes such a statement, his claim is supported by law. The only recourse the poor brother says, he comes to the brother and says, buy me out or sell to me. You ask, he's a poor brother. How is he going to buy out his brother if he has no cash? Well, he'll take a partner and he'll borrow money, buy out his brother, and then sell the asset and return the loan and take 50% back for himself. So the poor brother does have recourse, but only if, again, this is just a case portraying the same reality, the same law, that the only way you can force your brother to divide, your partner to divide, is if you tell him that you're going to buy or sell. Okay. Now we're going to summarize again. If each of the brothers says, I don't want to purchase your portion, I want to sell my portion, the property should be sold to others. So that's easy. So you have two brothers and they both have a bathhouse. You can't, or a olive press. You can't divide an olive press. So now what happens? If both brothers want to sell, beautiful, then you sell it. That's easy. The following rules apply if both of them say, I will not sell, but instead each of them wishes to purchase his colleague's portion. So that's one case. They both want to buy, or neither of them desires to purchase his colleague's portion nor to sell his own portion, but instead to remain partners in the property. So here is a problem. Here is a problem. We want to divide. I don't like you anymore. No offense. I'm not talking about you. We were partners. Now I don't like you anymore. Both of us want to buy the portion. Both of us want to buy the other one out. Or neither of us want to buy or sell, but we want to divide. So what do we do then? So here's the solution. What should they do? If the place was fit to rent, they should hire it out and divide the rent. If the place was not fit for rent, they should alternate. And this is case. I'm sorry I'm giving so many details, but this is really the case I want to get to. And here there's a lot of philosophy behind this. So if you're hanging on so far, it's worth it to hang on another few minutes, and we'll get to the philosophy here. So again, the scenario we're laying out is as follows. The scenario is a case where we have something, let's say a courtyard, where we're both partners, but we don't like each other anymore. So I don't want to see you, and you don't want to see me. Now, if we both want to sell and get out, that's wonderful. But what happens if we don't both want to sell? We both want to stay. We each want to buy the other person out, or we want it to stay half and half. What do? If you can rent the property, you rent it out and divide the rent. If you can't, it's a courtyard in front of your house, right? So in those days, the way it worked is you had multiple homes in the same courtyard, and people lived in their homes, but most of their activities they performed in the courtyard. So for example, if you're living in the Middle East, it's warm outside, and there's no, it's warm outside. So for most of the year, what you did in your house basically is you slept in your house. The eating and the cooking and the leisure you did outside in the courtyard, because the courtyard was one yard surrounded by a fence and many homes in that courtyard. So I can't rent the courtyard without renting the house. So I'm living in my house, you're living in your house, we have the same courtyard, we don't like each other anymore. We want to separate, but I don't want to sell my half, you don't want to sell your half. What do we do then? So now, this is an interesting opinion that now what's interesting about here is this is not a case that the Talmud writes explicitly about. This is Maimonides' own opinion. And therefore, you're going to see Maimonides' opinion, and then later on, I'm going to bring the opinion that disagrees with Maimonides, and this disagreement is going to give us insight into the philosophical opinion of Maimonides, which is why he rules this way. So let's see the case. What's the solution? Again, the solution is we have a house in a courtyard. We're both partners. We both want to live here, but we can't stand each other. And you can't force me to live with you together, and you can't force me to live with you together because we don't like each other. So what do? So here's Maimonides' solution. And like I mentioned, not everybody agrees with the solution, and this disagreement is going to give us insight into Maimonides' general philosophy about this whole discussion. So let's read the solution. The solution is as follows. I'm on the second line on the screen. If the place was not fit for rent, they should alternate. If the property is a courtyard, they should dwell in it, each for a year at a time. In other words, we have a house. We were partners. We both inherited it together. I don't like you. You don't like me. None of us want to sell. We each want to live in the house that we grew up in. So what do? Very simple. We'll alternate. You get it for a year, and then I get it for a year. Okay, why a year? So now Maimonides is going to lay out his rationale. So I'm on the fourth line. The rationale for this ruling is that it is impossible for them to dwell in it together because of the lack of privacy, and it is not large enough to divide. So we have a house. You can't divide a house, like I mentioned. It's not large enough to divide. You can't divide a house because it's too. You can't divide a house for many reasons. But we'll take the reason that you can't divide the house because it's not divisible in the sense that what if you get the dining room and I get the bathroom and you get the kitchen and I get the basement, it's different assets. You can't divide it that way. So therefore, what do? You can't force people to live together if they don't like each other, because they each have a right to privacy. Maimonides says that explicitly, because of the lack of privacy. So what do? A more frequent rotation is not employed, because a person would not trouble himself to move from one courtyard to another every 30 days. Hence, the rotation is carried out from year to year. Okay, so we said a lot of cases. In other words, it's not fair to tell somebody move every month. Last time I moved, I said, oh my God, it was so hard. I said, God, please, I don't want to move again. It's very difficult to move. You can't expect someone to move every month back and forth. But every year, that you can do. And therefore, the rotation is year to year. Okay, so we had a lot of cases. I'm just going to summarize the case that's important for us for this discussion, and then we'll continue. So, what's the scenario? It's a relatively straightforward scenario, even though there's a lot of side issues. The scenario is as follows. Me and my brother, we inherited a house from our father. This is a house but we don't like each other. So we have to divide. So we want to separate. So what's the solution? So if both of us want to sell the house and divide the assets and divide the money, that's wonderful. If none of us want to sell, we both want to buy the other brother out. That's one case. Or we don't want to sell or buy. We want to continue. We say we both want it. We both want it. We both grew up here. We're not interested in selling. We want to use our half. So what do I do then? So Maimonides' solution is, and like I said, this solution is not written in the Talmud, therefore people disagree. Maimonides' solution is every party gets a year. You alternate year by year. And then what are you doing? What values are you upholding? Number one, they each have a right to their use of their property. And you're upholding the important concept, according to Maimonides, the concept of privacy. In the language of the Talmud, they didn't name it privacy. They named it hezek re'iyah, damage through sight. So you can't force me to live together in a home with somebody who I don't like, because that person damages me through sight. What does it mean? He damages me through sight? It means he imposes on my privacy. And if he imposes on my privacy, we consider that a damage. So you can't force the two brothers to live together. And therefore, therefore the result will have to be that they should alternate the property year to year. Why year to year? Because you can't expect someone to move every 30 days, and therefore you do year to year. That is, ladies and gentlemen, what Maimonides says about this case. And now I'm going to hopefully, if anybody has any questions, we'll clarify, and then we move on to the opinion that disagrees with Maimonides, and then we talk about why Maimonides said what he said, and that's hopefully the roadmap for the next few moments. So far it's clear. Vicky, Zina, everything is good.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So about the father. So did the father perceive the possibility of brothers living together as ideal situation, or can he make a provision, like in his will, to give a priority to one brother? Because the issue here, or just imagine that it's not only privacy, because there might maybe some tension developing, or so it's not the ideal situation. So I'm not sure why this case is even being
okay. So you're making a good point. Could the father say, "I'm gifting"? The answer is that would be a discussion on the laws of inheritance, and it's possible for the father to say, "I'm gifting this property to you on these conditions." But that has to be a gift. It can't be an inheritance. If the father said nothing and he dies and the children both own it, now the father's out of the picture. So there is ways that you could control the asset. The father can control the asset before he passes away. But then he has to gift it to them in his lifetime. It becomes more complicated. You have to hire an attorney. I'm only half kidding. There are ways to do so. But when Maimonides says inherit, it's just an example, because in the beginning of the law, beginning of the chapter, he said that all these laws apply to any case where people are partners. Inheriting is one example. The other example is we were friends and we bought a house together and we didn't mind to live together, and now we don't like each other. So that would be the same case. So if we had a clause of what to do in that case, wonderful. But if we don't have a clause of what to do in that case, then we have a problem. So Maimonides says, what's the solution? You have two people that are partners in a property that want to stay in the property, but don't like each other and they don't want privacy. And it's not something easily divisible. It's not like a field where you say, you get 25 acres, I got 25 acres. It's a home. We can't both live in it together. So Maimonides says you rotate, you live in it for a year and I live in it for a year. And you'll see it's not an ideal situation. And therefore people disagree with Maimonides, but there is no ideal situation in this situation. And therefore, hence the discussion and hence the disagreement. But it becomes interesting because, like I said, like I alluded to earlier, there's going to be a disagreement, and every disagreement is really opening to the philosophical, opening to discover the philosophical perspective of Maimonides.
How about the second part of my question? Why Maimonides only brings up the privacy issue? There could be more severe issues with people living together who cannot stand each other.
Like what?
Like all kind of animosity,
Physical safety, we're not talking about
Right.
because we're not talking about physical safety because we assume we're talking about normal people. In other words, we're talking about people that we're not talking about us. We're talking about because we're talking about we're talking about land usage. We're really talking about what rights do I have in a property? Of course, I have rights to physical safety. And if someone threatens my physical safety, I dial 911. That's not the question. That's obvious. The question becomes, if I have a right to, if I own a property, what does that right include? Okay, it includes the rights to live in the house. But Maimonides says, not only does it include the right to live in a house, it also includes the right to have privacy in a home. That's interesting. Physical safety I have everywhere. Physical safety I'm entitled to in my house and on the streets. And if not, then either call 911 or if you live in America, you can follow the Second Amendment and then you solve that problem. But the question is, do I have a right? And you'll see in a minute, not everyone agrees with Maimonides. Do I have a right, if I'm a partner in this home, do I have a right to live in this house with privacy? Maimonides insists yes. So we have a problem. If each party is allowed to live in the house, each party is allowed to live in a house with privacy. So what do? It's not easily divisible. So what should we do? So the answer Maimonides gives is rotate. What does that show you? Even though rotating is a pain, you'll see the opinion that disagrees with the Rambam. How could you force someone to hire a moving truck every year? That's what a pain. But Maimonides says, what are you going to do? They both want to live here. A person is entitled to privacy. If I can live here, it means I can live here in privacy. And therefore, we have no choice but to alternate years.
I'd like to ask you a more general question. If right now, if I don't agree with the court decision, guns will show up and make me do it. What was the enforcement mechanism at that time with Jews?
So it depends. The answer is it depends. It depends where they lived and how they lived. It's a different discussion. Practically speaking, most times people had to listen to the court because either the court had some authority from the government to impose, or they had social pressures. So, for example, the most common one throughout the exile was excommunication. And it really worked because if the Jews excommunicated you and the Gentiles didn't really like you, so they weren't going to buy your merchandise, then you couldn't make a living. So there were ways to, for the most part, there were ways where the court would impose its will, but that's a secondary discussion. That's a discussion about all Jewish law. How do we impose law and order? So it depends on what legal power we have. But even before that, we're not talking so much about. We're talking about two citizens who want to do the law, who want to say, if you have a right to privacy, I'm willing to move out, but I want to know, do you have that right? So there's two questions. One question is, what is right? What is right under the law? Number two is, what do we do if one party doesn't want to accept it? So for the purpose of this discussion, me and you, we both own a property together. We both have rights here. We both want to separate. We both want privacy. We're both willing to accept what the Torah says. Now the question is, what does the Torah say? Am I allowed to live here? Yes. Am I allowed to live here with privacy? That would mean we have to rotate. So it's a question of what is right. And then there's a secondary question, how do we enforce what is right? Okay, I'm just going to read from a rabbi named the Ravid. The Ravid was a rabbi named Rabbi Avraham ben David. He lived in the time of Maimonides, and you know this. You must have heard this. That Maimonides, when he lived, Maimonides was a controversial figure for multiple reasons. One of the reasons were because people didn't like that he wrote the book we're reading because it simplified the law, it made it too accessible, and in some ways it did not offer the reasons behind the law, so they were afraid it's going to pull people away from Talmud. So a lot of people were not happy with Maimonides. There was one rabbi, the Ravid, who was much older than Maimonides, and he was very well respected, and he wrote comments on the book of Maimonides. And whenever he disagreed. He called it Hasagot HaRavid, the comments of the Ravid. Now, when you read it, he's very sharp. Sometimes he says, I have no idea where Maimonides gets this from. I have no idea where he makes it up. So where he made it up from. So when you read him, you think that he's very confrontational and he's very opposed to Maimonides. But in reality, the comments he wrote on Maimonides were a tremendous support. It was an endorsement of the book, because what it meant is, all the places where I'm not commenting, I agree with Maimonides. It also meant that Maimonides has the right to write such a book, regardless of if I agree or disagree on a specific point of law. So when in most standard publications of Maimonides, you have Maimonides, and whenever there's what they call a hasaga, a comment of the Ravid, they print the comment as well. And I'm going to bring you an example of where, in this case, in this scenario, the Ravid jumps in and disagrees. And that disagreement is an interesting one. And it gives us, like I said, it gives us insight into this whole discussion. And that's why I'm very excited about this law, because we have the Maimonides, we have the Ravid disagrees, and then we want to figure out what are they really fighting about. So the reason why I gave you this interpretation is because sometimes he's very sharp, but don't understand that this is actually a great endorsement. So in this specific case, it's not so sharp. You ready? This is an example of a mild opposition. You ready for a mild opposition? This law is so distant from my opinion. In other words, it's so out there, right? I totally disagree with this. In other words, it's so out there. I can't even figure out where he got this from. And I'm going to translate. Why could one fellow force the other fellow to move out every other year? It's a big pain. You want to start moving every year? So what's the solution of the Ravid? The Ravid says, if I don't want to sell and you don't want to sell, we have a choice. Let's both live together, and you have to accept my violation of your privacy, and I have to accept your violation of my privacy. You don't like it, so agree to buy me out or agree to sell. In other words, Maimonides comes up with an opinion. Why? And he says, why? Because it's not, why do I have to suffer to start moving out every year? And what happens if one year there's no market, there's no houses to rent on the market? I'm going to live in the streets. So Maimonides comes up with a solution. He says, okay, why don't we rotate? The Ravid says, rotate. You can rotate. You can't force me to have all that schlep, like they say in Yiddish, to schlep and burden myself by moving every year. So what's the Ravid solution? The Ravid solution is very simple. Both parties, you don't like each other. You're living together. We both live here together. We're both living in the dining room together. You don't like me? Buy me out. You don't like me? Agree to sell. But you can't force me to move out every year. And language of the Rambam, suffer my imposition of your privacy. In the language of the Ravid, you don't like me? Too bad. Either sell, or if you don't want to sell, you don't want to sell me your half. So I'll damage. We'll damage each other. I'll suffer your invasion of my privacy, and you'll suffer my invasion of your privacy. That's the Ravid solution, because again, he says you cannot force somebody to start moving out every year. So that's a technical disagreement. But the post-Maimonides commentators say, oh, no, this is not technical at all. The reason for this disagreement is because they have a fundamental difference of what does it mean privacy? What does it mean the right to privacy? And because they have a different view of what the right to privacy is, that's why in this practical case, they come up with two different solutions, where Maimonides says alternate, Maimonides will not tolerate any imposition, any imposition of my privacy, any violation of the right of privacy, and he's willing to make the party schlep and move out every year. Whereas Ravid says, you don't want to move out, you don't want to both sell. Okay, both of you live here together. You're going to say he's harming me? Okay, you suffer the harm. So these are the two practical solutions. None of them are perfect. Maimonides says you got to alternate every year, move in, move out. And the other guy says, no, you have to sit at the breakfast table together with the guy that you don't like. I don't know which one's worse.
Yeah, that's the question. Why don't we give them a choice and decide and let them decide what's worse?
There's no choice because the question is, what does the law say? Do I have a right? The question is, again, let's start from the beginning. I'm not compromising with you. With all due respect, I'm not compromising. I want all my rights under the law, and I want to be in this house. So Ravid says, no problem. Both of you have the right to be in this house. Nobody wants to compromise. Both of you have the right to live in this house. Live in this house. And both of you, you don't have privacy? Too bad. Maimonides says, no. Built in to the right of usage is the right to privacy. And therefore, it's not an option from the perspective of Maimonides to say, live here and don't have privacy. It's not an option. Living in a home means the right to privacy. So therefore, Maimonides says, go ahead.
I think Maimonides is right, because that right to privacy is a very important right, and if you violate that, it can lead to many serious problems.
Okay, so that's why you're in good company. You're in the company of Maimonides. But what's the legal theory? We're going to go a little bit deeper and figure out what the legal theory is. But yeah, you're saying Maimonides says that the right to privacy is critical and fundamental, and you can't force the people to give it up. But I'm going to get a little philosophical here, the philosophy of the law. And this is not, I'm not saying this is the only way to explain this, but this is a possible way. And it just shows you how the Jewish people keep busy, and how even the right to privacy, we're going to have two ways of defining what the right to privacy means. Right? So how do you define what is the meaning of the right to privacy? There's two meanings, and it gets a little philosophical. But again, the beauty of this philosophy is that even though it looks like the two solutions, the two definitions are abstract definitions and they don't have ramification, here you will see that there is a practical ramification. In other words, the Talmud says that there is a concept called the right to privacy. The exact terminology the Talmud uses is the right is, I'm not allowed to damage someone with my sight. So if I look at your private space, I'm damaging you with my sight. The question is, what is the definition of that? Based on the question of what that definition is, that will help us understand where and how it's enforced. So here is the one possible way of describing the disagreement between the Rambam and the Ravid. Again, I'm not saying it's the only one, but it's one way of explaining this. One explanation is, the Rambam's explanation is that an invasion of privacy is actually we consider it just like we consider any other damage. So if you go and you hit me over the head with a hammer, that's a damage. It's prohibited. You're not allowed to do it. So too, the right to privacy, what the Talmud calls the damage through sight, is just like any other damage. So Maimonides gives those two damages the same legal severity. You can't hit me over the head with a hammer, and you can't hit me over the head with your eyes. That's why the Talmud refers to it as damage through sight. And if it's a damage, we treat it just like all the other damages. Okay, if that's Maimonides' view, so let me ask you a question. Would we come up with a solution where the court would say, okay, Menachem, you live with the other guy in the same house, and you whack him over the head with a hammer, and he'll whack you over the head with his hammer. It's even. It's even. You're hitting him, he's hitting you. It's even. No, that's ridiculous. If we consider the damage through sight to be a real damage, then there's no possibility of saying, I could damage you and you damage me and we're equal, because you're not allowed to damage the other person. That's why Maimonides has no choice but to say that you have to alternate. Whereas the Ravid doesn't really believe that damaging somebody else, that's invading the person's privacy, is damage like hitting him over the head. How does he define the damage through sight? He defines it that if you're robbing me of usage, that's the term, you're robbing me of usage. What do I mean? I mean there are certain things that I will only do if I'm alone in the home. And the fact that you're here, you're depriving me of certain usage of this property. But it's not considered like you're damaging me, like you're hitting me over the head with a hammer. Therefore, the Ravid believes that, okay, we can make a compromise. Both people will live in the home. And yes, they're not damaging each other. They're just depriving each other of certain usages. But he doesn't define that as damage the same way knocking somebody over the head with a hammer is damage. And therefore, when we come to a scenario where two people don't like each other, and they both don't want to sell, and they both want to live in the home, and they both have a problem because they both want to be here, the Ravid says, okay, so you be by this kitchen table, I'll be by the kitchen table, you won't have privacy, I won't have privacy, it's okay. Why? Because he doesn't see invading the person's privacy as a real damage. He defines it as you're depriving the other person of a certain usage, but it's not an actual damage. Therefore, we both compromise and we both will not use the property fully. Okay, that's fine. But Maimonides' view, as Vicky sensed this, Maimonides' view is no. Invading somebody's privacy, the Talmud refers to it as hezek re'iyah. You're damaging somebody with your eyes. Maimonides sees this is just like hitting someone over the head with a hammer. So there's no solution. I'll hit you over the head and you'll hit me over the head. That's ridiculous. You can't say that. And therefore, Maimonides says we must separate the two and we must rotate year for year. So what's interesting about here, because we have a philosophical dispute of dispute of what the definition of invading somebody's privacy is. Is it considered as severe as active damage, or is it just depriving the other person of certain usage? And that philosophical disagreement informs how Maimonides and the Ravid will address this specific law. Maimonides says it's like hitting somebody over the head, and therefore, I know it's a schlep, but we have no choice. We must separate the parties and we must have them rotate, even though there's costs of moving and it's a pain and it's difficult. We have no choice. We can't let the other guy hit one guy hit the other guy over the head with a hammer, and vice versa, and say it's fair. I hit you, you hit me. It doesn't work. It's not an option. Ravid says it's an option. Why? Because I'm not really damaging you. What am I doing? We're depriving each other of certain usage. Okay, so we'll both use part of the property. We'll use it for certain aspects. We won't use it for others. He's able to tolerate that much more than Maimonides, because he does not believe that when the Talmud refers to invasion of privacy as damage, he doesn't consider it as damage, just like hitting the guy over the head with a hammer. So that is the thesis. You could agree with it, you could disagree. I'm not saying it's the only way of learning Maimonides, but that's the thesis. So summary, just to summarize, summaries, we have the question of what to do when both parties want to live in the property together. So Maimonides says you rotate. The Ravid says you don't rotate because you can't make a guy move out. So what you do is you say both of you could live in the property simultaneously and you'll damage each other. That was the difference in law. And now we get to the difference in philosophy, a possible distinction, and say what's at the root of this disagreement? At the root is what is the definition of damage through sight. Maimonides says it's just like hitting the other guy over the head, and therefore you cannot allow both parties to damage each other. The Ravid says, no, it's not that severe. It's just you're depriving me of certain things that I cannot do that I would have done if you're not here. Okay, that's not real. It's not a real damage. So that's the summary. Go ahead, Zach.
Question. Suppose I am Noi in my boat with my wife, and we have to get separated. And Maimonides comes in and say, okay, 1 year you will be on this boat, another year, another one. You'll rotate. How do I rotate? There is flat over there. You see my point?
1 second. I have to make sure my volume is loud. I'm not sure I understood. You said that you both have a boat and you want to divide and you want to rotate.
No, we just discussed it. No, float.
Yeah.
No boat.
Yeah.
Float.
The ark, yes.
Noah with his wife get separated.
Yeah.
And the judge, Maimonides, comes in and say, you rotate. 1 year, one will be on the boat, another year, another. But the wife says, where will I go? There is sea around. What do you mean rotate? But people say, oh, you can't, your privacy is like hitting me with the hammer of the head. You have to get out for a year and then you'll come back.
Okay, so that you're doing what you're supposed to do is bring us an extreme case where it's life and death.
Right.
So life and death scenario may be different. Maybe life and death may be different, but we're talking about we're talking about here is, could you burden the people when it's a case of it's not a question of life and death. It's about burdening people. So we have a choice. Either we say burden both parties, or we say allow both parties to harm each other. That's really the difference.
Still, I imagine wife wouldn't have financial resources as the husband. She may not be able to rent similar house or another house for a year. That could be a real problem for one of the tenants to get out for a year.
So that's why that's Ravid's position. That's Ravid's argument. But I'm asking you, if you have a view, look, even in this country, we have disputes of how strong is the right to privacy. But if you believe that a person really, so Maimonides is interesting. Maimonides is saying that the right to privacy is so important that it actually overpowers other considerations. Of course, there's no perfect solution. Of course, there's going to be other problems. Even Ravid says the guy's going to be in the street. Not always am I going to find it. You make me move out. Not always am I going to find a house. I may have to move into the homeless shelter. But but that just shows that Maimonides' view of the right to privacy is so powerful that he says, I have no other option. What do you want me to do? You want to would I let you sit in someone's house and knock him over the head with a hammer? I can't do that. Because this just shows how powerful the right to privacy is in the view of Maimonides. So it's actually fascinating. You're right. It's almost surprising, but it shows that we're taking a very radical view of the right to privacy. And it's fascinating because you wouldn't think a religion is into privacy, right? You would think religion is about control, community. We want you to make sure you're doing what God wants. It's fascinating that Judaism is understanding and articulating the right to privacy, and Maimonides is actually taking it even further.
Rabbi, I'm still
Yes.
with Maimonides because right to privacy is just the beginning. Because if you don't give people that right, then inevitably one party will dominate each other, and that will create some other kind of control problems, abuse problems.
Okay, that could be. But even if you have a scenario where both parties are the same, it's not a scenario where one person is stronger than the other. We're both bullies. We both know how to defend ourselves. But even in that case, Maimonides would say privacy is a right. You're saying that privacy is a protection against other harms. And I agree with you. Privacy has other side benefits. But I think Maimonides would insist that even if you have two bullies and each one who are not afraid of other harms, the only harm at stake is right to privacy, Maimonides is taking an extreme view. Privacy, if you invade my privacy, it's like you're damaging me. And we're not going to tolerate this type of damage, just like we're not going to tolerate you bang me over the head and I bang you over the head. It's not happening. We cannot accept that possibility. Okay, Zach is very creative. You're going to come with all kinds of cases of scenarios where there'll be a negative result. That just emphasizes Maimonides' point. And despite those negative results, the right to privacy is more important than that. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating, especially that, like I said, that a religion will articulate this right to privacy in this degree. To me, this is fascinating.
It is fascinating, but it is in line with the religion being promoter of moral
Yes,
value.
but other people see religion as promoter of control of the leaders of the religion on the people, right? But if that would be the case, Judaism would say, right to privacy? What are you hiding? Even today in America, you turn on the news, and you have this idea of privacy versus national security, or privacy versus other questions. And there's always an argument that the people against the people who want a right to privacy. The other side is, what if you're not cheating, if you're not hiding your taxes, what do you care if the government sees your computer? From the perspective of Judaism, that's absolutely wrong. I have a right to privacy because it's my right. Why the right is philosophically, it's important, is another discussion. But I have the right, and it's not a sign that I'm hiding anything. And in fact, if you deprive me, you're actually harming me. And that Judaism should articulate it, not today, 2,000 years ago in the Talmud, is fascinating. And Maimonides, we see here how extreme Maimonides takes this, that even though there may be a scenario where there are going to be other harms done to the parties, Maimonides says it doesn't matter. The right to privacy is more important. The Ravid says, no, it's not more important. We have to consider the right to privacy as one right, but there are other rights. A right of usage. You can't make me schlep. Maimonides is going much more extreme than the Ravid. That's why it's so beautiful. It shows how much he understands this to be important. To me, this is absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. So that will be it for today. We're going to take a 6-week break from Maimonides, as we said. I said it last week, but it's really this week because we're going to do 6 weeks of the JLI not on Tuesday at 10, but on